Chapter 25. Where Paths Entwine. The path ahead was a pale ribbon between towering trees, their trunks straight and thick as pillars, their crowns brushing against the night sky as though they were tasked with holding up the heavens themselves. The convoy moved quietly, hooves muffled on the mossy ground, the air filled with the faint scent of pine and damp earth. Ferry rode in silence, though his thoughts were far from still. His gaze kept lifting to the faint circle of light above their company, shimmering like a halo spread thin across the treetops. It had been bright once, protective and steady, but now it seemed to fade with each passing mile, its glow paling like the last breath of twilight. The long night is near, Ferry thought, and the idea sent a shiver crawling along his spine. He tried not to dwell on it, but the pale sheen reminded him of every hushed warning time had given, every whisper of stories that had no endings. He let his eyes fall to the road again, where the starlight pooled in patches between roots, turning the journey into a dreamlike procession of light and shadow. A soft voice broke through his thoughts. "You are too quiet, Ferry. It is not good for the heart to walk with shadows when the land offers so much light." He turned and found Rosemary walking at his side, her cloak brushing softly against the undergrowth. There was no urgency in her stance, only calm and a gentle brightness in her eyes. "Akna is not a cruel land," she continued, almost as though she were singing. "See how the air holds neither frost nor scorch? Fruits swell in every season, berries sweeter than honey, apples that crisp like laughter, and herbs that heal faster than any spell. And our forests." She lifted her chin to the vault of trees above them. "They are guardians, strong and eternal, their branches clasping the stars so they never fall." Her words were warm, a tapestry of affection woven for the land that had birthed her. Ferry wanted to share in it, wanted to let her voice drown out the ache that followed him like a shadow. But his eyes betrayed him, sliding back, always back, to where Sage walked beside Matilda at the rear. His heavy frame bent slightly toward her, his great hand occasionally brushing against her cloak as if by accident, and Matilda's face, turned ever toward the ground, seemed carved in silence. Ferry's heart lurched, and Rosemary must have seen it. She spoke again, firmer this time, urging him away from the sight. "You must learn to see Akna with your own eyes, not always through another's. This is your homeland, Ferry. The sooner you love it, the sooner it will love you in return." "I am still learning," Ferry admitted. His voice sounded too soft in the wide forest. "Everything is strange here. Beautiful, yes, but strange. These trees, these skies, even the air. It's all unlike the world I knew. And though it is charming, I can't pretend I miss home. I miss the land of humans." Rosemary tilted her head, considering him. "Tell me what you miss." "Winter," Ferry said without hesitation. The word itself seemed to warm him. Snow on the windowsills, the smell of pine logs crackling in the hearth, nights huddled with loved ones near the fire. "I miss hot chocolate so thick it leaves a mustache, and honey tea so sweet it makes you forget the cold outside." Her smile faltered at that. "Akna knows no winter. The cold cannot pass the wards woven into its roots. Ours is a land of eternal spring, sometimes of summer, but never of frost. The only place where you will find chill winds is not one I would wish for you to see." That last sentence drew him up short. He caught the sudden heaviness in her tone, the way her eyes had dimmed like embers losing flame. "Where is that place?" he asked. Rosemary hesitated, glancing at the trees as if they might overhear. "It is far from here, a hollow of ice, where no song can reach. And it is cursed. You should never set foot there." "What dwells in it?" Ferry pressed, unable to let go. Her face grew pale. She lowered her voice until it was scarcely more than a breath. "Better not to speak its name. It is a soul destroyer. That is all you need know. To utter its name is to invite its notice, and no one who has its notice lives long in peace." A silence stretched between them then, heavier than before, so that even the rustling of the trees seemed subdued. Ferry wanted to ask more, but Rosemary's expression closed like a door. At last, she forced a smile and moved to the side of the path, kneeling swiftly among the ferns. "Enough of such talk. Here is something worth your attention instead." She plucked a small plant that shimmered faintly beneath the starlight, its leaves long and silver green, tipped with violet. "Moonveil," she named it, holding it delicately between her fingers. "It grows only under starlight, never beneath the sun. Boiled into tea, it calms restless hearts and strengthens dreams. In times of fear, it grants courage enough to endure until dawn." The herb glowed faintly as she held it up, its shimmer dancing like a candle flame caught in dew. Ferry watched, transfixed, and for a moment the pale circle above them and the ache at the back of the convoy both seemed far away. Rosemary tucked the moonveil safely into her pouch and rose again, brushing moss from her knees. You see, Akna is full of gifts, if you will only learn to look for them. Ferry nodded, though his thoughts still circled the forbidden place, the soul destroyer, and the way Rosemary's eyes had darkened when she spoke of it. But he said nothing more. The convoy moved on, the circle of light above them growing ever paler, and the forest seemed to lean closer, as though it too was listening. Ferry had always thought of Una as the living spark of their company. Where others brooded or wore their worries on their faces, she had been light itself. Laughter tumbling from her lips, words spilling like the brook of her thoughts, songs rising unbidden to match the cadence of their long marches. But of late, something had changed. He noticed it first in her eyes. Once quick and gleaming, ready to catch the smallest jest or mischief, now they were dulled, their fire dimmed. She rode with her fox cub nestled against her chest, arms wrapped around it as if shielding it from the very air. She held the creature like a mother clings to a child, as if the little heart beating against her own were the only tether keeping her steady. She did not sing anymore. She did not chatter about herbs or riddles or stars. She barely spoke at all. The others gave her space, perhaps thinking she needed it. But Ferry knew better. Silence was not Una's nature. He studied her as they rode, noting the weight in her shoulders, the way her laughter had been buried somewhere deep. Yet beneath the folds of her layered dress, bright silks, dulled now by travel's dust, Ferry knew lay her true strength. Pockets sewn into the fabric, seams hiding vials, powders, roots, and dried leaves. He had seen her conjure a storm from a pinch of dust, cloak them in fog with the sweep of a hand, bend the weather itself into a shield. Una was far more than the mask she wore, and yet now the mask was gone, leaving only weariness in its place. Ferry urged his horse nearer until he rode beside her. The cub stirred, lifting its pointed snout, but Una kept her gaze forward. "You've gone quiet," he said gently. "Have I?" she replied, though the words fell flat without the usual tease. "You used to outtalk Finn, and that's saying something," Ferry pressed, trying for levity. It earned him no more than the faintest flicker of a smile. For a moment, they rode in silence, only the rhythm of hooves filling the air. Then Ferry leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Is it Ragnall?" At the name, Una stiffened. Her hands tightened around the fox cub, pressing it closer. She shook her head, a sharp movement, and her lips pressed into a line. "Una, don't," she said, the words soft, but edged like glass. He let the silence stretch, his heart pricked with unease. He knew Ragnall had remained behind at the Cloud Fortress, training for the long night. He knew, too, that something unspoken passed between them, something deeper than camaraderie. But whatever wound had opened, Una would not bear it. When at last she spoke again, it was not of Ragnall, nor of herself. "The road is long. Keep your eyes on it, fairy boy." And that was all. Afterwards, she seemed even smaller in her silence, retreating into herself as if she belonged to another world. She hummed no tunes, spoke no words, and carried only her fox cub close, leaving Ferry to wonder at the sorrow she would not name. The road unfurled before them in a ribbon of silver stones, gleaming faintly as though the starlight itself had chosen to seep into the earth. Each step rang soft against the polished surface, a sound delicate enough to be mistaken for whispers. On one side of the path, the forest stretched on endlessly, majestic, towering trees that held the skies aloft in their ancient embrace. Their trunks shone pale gray, their leaves trembling like glass when stirred by the gentlest wind. On the other side, a vast crop spread across the land, glowing blue beneath the frail touch of the stars. The stalks swayed in unison, a silent tide rolling across the fields, giving the strange illusion that the earth itself breathed beneath them. They rested only briefly, and by the time they rose again, the silver stones of the road gleamed brighter, guiding them onward. The forest thickened, the fields gave way, and then, like a vision unveiled, Waymere appeared before them. At first, Ferry thought he was gazing at another forest, white trees rising tall against the night. But no, these were buildings. Slender, graceful towers carved of pale stone, reaching upward like fingers toward the constellations. Arches soared between them, vast gateways through which the starlight spilled in streams, as if the heavens themselves poured into the city. Windows glowed faintly with warmth, some round like moons, others tall and slender as blades. Pathways wove between the towers, paved in the same silver stone as the road, gleaming softly in the dark. Ferry stopped walking. "This isn't a village," he whispered, awe hollowing his voice. "It's a city." Indeed, there was nothing small or provincial about Waymere. Even the air seemed grander, fuller, somehow. And then the people emerged. Tall, noble figures stepped through the archways, their movements graceful, their faces luminous beneath the starlight. They smiled as they passed, inclining their heads in greetings that seemed both intimate and formal. Their garments shimmered with subtle hues, robes woven with threads of silver, cloaks of deep twilight blues. Yet alongside them walked smaller folk, fae with faces that glimmered like beetle shells, or with hair like trailing vines. They laughed together, shared words, and traded gestures of affection and familiarity. There was no division here. Tall or small, majestic or quaint, all seemed woven into one tapestry. Rosemary breathed out, almost dreamily. "See how they live? Harmony is possible, Fairy." This is Akna, but Ferry could not stop the gnawing unease that curled in his chest. Harmony? Yes, but too perfect, too unbroken. He searched for cracks, for shadows hiding behind the brilliance. Where were the signs of danger time had warned them about? Where were the whispers of the enemy that loomed over their journey? Waymere gleamed without fear, its people laughing and smiling as though the long night was nothing more than a tale told to frighten children. Sage muttered under his breath. A place like this, how could an enemy even enter? Time, who had been silent, stepped closer and spoke with quiet gravity. "Do not be fooled by beauty. Peace is often a mask. The brighter the light, the deeper the shadows it casts." His gaze swept over them, sharp and commanding. "Stay hidden. Do not draw attention to yourselves." Ferry nodded, though his heart wrestled with doubt. The city was radiant, welcoming, safe, or at least it seemed so. And yet every time he tried to breathe it in, the air turned heavy, the question louder. Was the enemy truly here, or were they chasing shadows across a world too dazzling for truth? He drew his hood closer over his brow, the silver marks on his skin hidden once more. Whatever Waymere was, whatever it might conceal, they would need to tread carefully. And as the gates of the radiant city opened before them, Ferry felt the old tug of uncertainty, the haunting sense that in Akna, nothing was ever what it seemed. The inn rose from the heart of Waymere like a glowing lantern, tall and graceful, its walls carved of pale stone veined with silver. The door, a great arch of polished wood, opened with a sigh, letting spill the scent of warmth, baked bread, and spiced herbs. Inside, the air hummed with life. The inn's great hall was circular, crowned by a domed ceiling of crystal glass through which the starlight streamed, pooling like liquid silver across the polished floor. The beams caught on every cup, every spoon, every eye, turning the place into a quiet constellation of its own. Ferry followed Time and the others to a table tucked away in one of the darker corners. The table was made of thick, gnarled wood, its surface smooth from centuries of use, its edges carved with old fey runes that glowed faintly when touched. Ferry ran his fingers over them absently, feeling a pulse beneath, as though the table itself remembered all who had ever sat there. They ate quietly. A steaming bowl of vegetable soup fragrant with roots and wild herbs, and baked tubercles that looked like purple potatoes but tasted sweeter, their soft flesh melting into butter. The flavors were comforting, earthy and rich, a warmth that seeped into the bones. Ferry caught Matilda's eyes briefly across the table, but she quickly looked away. Sage tried to fill the silence with a few jokes about fae cooking, but even he seemed weary tonight. "Eat well," Time said after a while, his voice deep and measured. "We'll need our strength for what's to come." When they had eaten their fill, a pleasant drowsiness settled over the group. The hall murmured with laughter and clinking mugs, the soft hum of string music weaving between the conversations. Ferry leaned back against the wall, half listening, his thoughts drifting like smoke, until the door opened again. A short figure stepped inside. shaking off the night's mist. The stranger's pointed hood nearly brushed his nose, and his coat, long and patchy, was adorned with a jumble of small musical instruments. Pipes, flutes, whistles, even tiny cymbals that jingled with every step. His face was the color of autumn leaves, and his eyes sparkled like mischief itself. "Brett!" someone shouted, rising from a table near the center. "Come, old fox, sing us something merry before the stars grow cold." A cheer went up, mugs raised high. The little man, Brett, bowed dramatically, the instruments on his coat chiming in response. He climbed onto a small platform near the hearth, unslung a lute from his back, and gave its strings a testing pluck that made the air itself seem to straighten in attention. Then, with a grin that could rival dawn, he began to play. The first notes were quick and bright, tripping over one another like laughter. His voice carried easily, warm and roughened by years of song. He sang of a farmer who'd courted a fairy and ended up plowing clouds instead of fields, of a fox who stole a lord's crown only to lose it to a magpie. Laughter rippled through the inn like fire through dry grass. Tankards clinked, boots tapped, and soon the crowd was clapping in time, calling for verses and choruses they knew by heart. Ferry found himself smiling, despite the weight that never left his chest. For a little while, even the shadows seemed to retreat, drowned out by mirth and melody. When the last chord of the jolly tune faded, Brett bowed low, wiping his brow with a flourish. The inn rang with cheers, but before he could strum again, a lone voice rose from the back, soft but steady. "The Ballad of the Lost Son," the voice said. Instantly, the cheer stilled. Brett's smile faltered. He looked down at his lute for a long moment, his fingers hovering above the strings. Around the room, all noise faded. The laughter, the whispers, even the clatter of cups. The starlight from the dome dimmed, or perhaps it only seemed so, as the weight of the request settled over them all. At last, Brett nodded. "Aye," he murmured, "for the lost son." He began to play again, but this time the melody was slow, mournful, a river of sorrow winding through the air. His voice dropped to a near whisper, rich and aching with old grief. "Born of starlight, child of crown, lifted high, then cast down. Taken by winds to a nameless shore, the lost son walks where none implore. Oh, silver cradle, empty, still, the night remembers, the stars will. If only the walls had ears to weep, they'd tell of the prince the skies still keep." The song went on, each verse a lament for a child stolen from his kin, a prince whose laughter once filled the halls of crystal. When the final notes trembled into silence, no one moved. Heads were bowed, hands clasped, eyes glistening with memories they did not own but somehow shared. Even the candles seemed to burn quieter, their tiny flames bending low in mourning. Then, after what felt like an age, a voice rose from near the hearth. "Tell us, Brett," it said softly. "Tell us the story of the lost prince." The bard looked up, his eyes shadowed but shining. He set his lute aside, folded his small hands on his knees, and leaned forward. And as the crowd leaned closer, the only sound in the room was the faint hiss of candle wicks and the steady hum of the starlight above, before Brett began, in a voice low and solemn as a prayer. "Long ago," Brett began, his voice lowering until even the air seemed to hush to hear him, "before the long night first stirred, a child was born beneath a silver star." The murmur of the inn faded to nothing. Only the soft hum of the starlight filtering through the dome remained, silver dust swirling faintly above their heads. Brett's eyes gleamed, far away, as if he were seeing through time itself. "They say his birth was heralded by the songs of the wind," he went on, "and that every flower in Okna bloomed at once. The rivers ran brighter, the air grew sweeter, and the moon, aye, the moon itself, bowed lower that night to watch over the cradle of the child destined to carry the light within him." He paused, plucking a soft chord from his lute. The note lingered, trembling, before fading into the silence. The queen and the king loved him dearly. To them he was the promise of dawn after long darkness, the laughter that turned their solemn halls to joy. His cries were like music, and his smile. Brett's voice faltered a moment, almost reverent. His smile was said to heal hearts that had long forgotten warmth. Around the hall, no one stirred. Tankards sat untouched, hands frozen in half gestures, eyes fixed on the little bard who looked suddenly older than time. "But love and light," he said softly, "cast long shadows. And there are always those who wait in the dark." He leaned forward. the starlight drawing lines across his weathered face. Then came the long night, a night much like the one drawing near again. The moon turned red, the stars hid their faces, and the winds howled like mourning mothers. And in that night, the prince was taken. A collective breath was drawn, as though the room itself gasped. "Taken?" someone whispered, their voice trembling. "By whom?" Brett's fingers stilled upon the strings. For a heartbeat, only silence answered. Then he sighed, like a man laying down a burden older than his bones. "There were spies in the glass castle," he said, servants of greed and envy, cloaked in loyalty. They had waited long and silent, their hearts darkened by old wounds and older grudges. And when the shadow of the long night fell across Akna, they struck. He plucked a single, low note, soft as the fall of a tear. "The story is old," he continued, "older than most who dare remember. The details are scattered now, lost to time like petals from a cherry tree carried away by the wind. None can say who bore the child away or where he was taken. Some say he vanished into the mortal world, others that he was hidden by the forest spirits themselves. All that remains are whispers, and grief carved into the walls of the palace of glass." A long silence followed. The crowd seemed frozen in that grief, every face pale in the silver light. Then, from somewhere in the back, another voice rose, a young one, trembling but insistent. "You said it was plotted," it said. "A revenge. But by who? Who would dare such treachery?" Brett's gaze lifted slowly, his eyes glinting with a knowing that chilled the room. He looked around at them all, at the faces half lit by starlight, at the flicker of unease settling in their eyes, and for a heartbeat, it seemed as though he searched for someone among them. When he finally spoke, it was almost a whisper. "One name endures," he said. "One name the wind still carries through the ruins of the old songs." He paused. The starlight above them dimmed, as though the heavens themselves strained to listen. Then Brett spoke the name, soft and heavy, and it fell upon the inn like a shroud. "Stefan." The words seemed to echo, though no one dared breathe. Ferry felt something twist deep within his chest, something cold, familiar, and unspeakable. The bard's eyes flickered toward the shadowed corner where Ferry sat, as though the story were meant for him alone. And then Brett looked away, his hands trembling faintly as he plucked one last sorrowful chord. Its sound thin and fragile, like the last note of a dying star. At the sound of the Lord's name, Ferry felt the air flee from his lungs. It was as though the walls of the inn were closing in on him, pressing from all sides, the murmurs and shifting gazes turning to a distant, suffocating hum. His chest tightened. "Stefan." The name rang through his head like the toll of a bell, heavy, final, echoing in places he had tried to keep untouched. He rose slowly, his hands trembling beneath the table. Time's eyes caught his for an instant, calm, knowing, but Ferry couldn't stay. He needed space. He needed air. Without a word, he turned and walked toward the door. The creak of the hinges sounded louder than anything, and for a heartbeat, he felt the entire inn watching him. Then he stepped into the night. The air outside was sharp and cool, filled with the faint scent of dew and pine. Starlight spilled across the narrow streets, tracing pale rivers of silver between the white stone walls. But the calm of Waymere only made the storm inside him grow stronger. He kept walking, his pace quickening until it became a run. He brushed past passers-by, tall, serene figures wrapped in long cloaks, their faces turning toward him in confusion as he passed. He barely saw them. The streets blurred into streaks of moonlight and shadow, his heart pounding louder than his footsteps. He ran until the road gave way to open fields, and beyond them, the whispering edge of the forest. There, at the outskirts of Waymere, he took flight. That moment, something in him broke free. He leapt into the air, the wind rushing against his face, lifting him higher and higher until the lights of the village became a scatter of stars below. The world unfolded beneath him, the tall white towers of Waymere glowing faintly, the forests dark and ancient, the rivers glistening like ribbons of mercury beneath the starlit sky. The air tasted of pine and cool earth, and something faintly sweet, like distant rain. And for the first time that night, Ferry could breathe again. He let the wind carry him, soaring above the silver fields, feeling the tension loosen from his body, the turmoil within him easing with every cloud his flight met. Yet even as he felt the freedom of flight, his thoughts would not quiet. The name still lingered, Stefan. It echoed through his mind like a curse, weaving itself with memories he didn't fully understand. How could such a beautiful world hide such darkness? How could places like Waymere, all shimmering waters and gentle laughter, live under shadows so old, so heavy? Ahead, he saw the glint of water, a wide lake spreading like a mirror beneath the stars. He slowed his flight and descended, landing softly upon the grassy shore. The ground shimmered faintly with dew, and the lake lay before him, perfectly still, reflecting both the stars above and the faint, pale glow of the surrounding cliffs. He stood there for a long time, lost in the silence. The water seemed alive, shifting with glimmers of blue and silver, as if holding a world of its own beneath the surface. A strange peace settled over him, though it was tinged with unease. So much beauty, he whispered to himself, his voice barely more than breath, and yet so cold. He crouched by the shore, dipping his fingers into the water. It was cool, gentle, yet there was something beneath it, something he couldn't name. Secrets, perhaps, or echoes of the truth he was not yet meant to see. A breeze passed over the lake, rippling its mirror surface and brushing through his hair. It carried with it the scent of starlight and pine, and something else, something that felt like a whisper, urging him to return. He stood there, the wind tugging softly at his clothes. The world felt lighter now, not clearer, but less suffocating. He turned one last time toward the lake, watching its silver surface settle back into stillness, and then spread his wings once more. As he took flight, the village lights of Waymere shimmered ahead of him like distant stars calling him home. He followed them through the calm sky, the cool wind steady against his face, carrying him back toward the inn, and whatever waited for him there. The stable stood quiet beneath the pale light of the star. The air was thick with the smell of hay and warm breath, the soft snorts of the horses echoing faintly in the stillness. Ferry had found a corner near his steed, his back against a post, his thoughts spiraling like restless birds. The lake's reflection still haunted his eyes, that shimmer of beauty laced with something colder, something hidden. He barely noticed the footsteps approaching until the door creaked open. "You shouldn't have gone off like that." Time's voice came from the shadows, calm as always, but there was strain in it, a tension barely veiled beneath his usual composure. "You drew attention. Do you realize what could have happened if what?" Ferry cut him off, rising to his feet. "If someone saw me? If someone realized I don't belong here?" Time's jaw tightened. "That's exactly what I mean." Ferry let out a bitter laugh. "You say that like it's a crime to breathe the air here, to look at things I don't understand. Everything in this place is a secret. Every word, every whisper. You keep talking about danger, but all I see are smiling faces and songs that don't tell the truth." Time stepped closer, his expression unreadable. "You don't know what you're saying?" "Oh, I don't?" Ferry's voice rose, echoing off the stable walls. "I heard his name, Time. His name. And you tell me it's just an old story, a drunken bard's fable? You expect me to believe that?" Time's eyes flickered, the calm in them darkening. "I expect you to trust me. You think I'd let harm come to you?" Ferry took a step forward, his fists clenched. "Trust you?" His voice trembled, a mix of anger and pain. "I trusted you when you told me the forest was safe. When you said the songs were only stories. But everything here is half a truth. Every time I ask, you turn away. Every answer you give just leads to another question. Because not everything can be said out loud," Time hissed, lowering his voice. "Not here, not now." "And why not?" Ferry demanded. "Because the walls might be listening? Because someone might find out what you're hiding?" Time's expression hardened. "Careful, Garrett." But Ferry didn't stop. "Maybe you're part of it. Maybe you've been part of it all along. The secrets, the lies, the things everyone's too afraid to say." The words hung heavy in the air, sharp as shattered glass. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Only the horses stirred, uneasy, their hooves shifting against the straw. Time's voice, when it came, was quiet, but it carried a weight that silenced the night. "Do not let fear make a fool of you. You heard a song, nothing more. Old stories change with every telling, twisted, broken, until they serve whoever's listening. That bard has seen too many cups of wine, and too few dawns." He paused, taking a breath. "Don't let a ghost of a tale tear apart what we're fighting for." Ferry looked away, jaw tight, his chest heaving. "I didn't ask for tales," he muttered. "I asked for truth." Time's tone softened. "And I'm asking for patience. Just trust me, Garrett. Please. But the plea found no hold. Ferry's eyes were distant now, lost in some thought that went far beyond the stable walls. He turned from Time, brushing past him, and crouched near his horse, running a hand along its mane. "I'll sleep here tonight," he said quietly. "It's quieter than the inn." Time hesitated at the doorway, his silhouette framed in the faint silver glow from outside. "You shouldn't be alone." "I already am," Ferry whispered, not looking back. Time lingered a moment longer, as though he wanted to say more, but then he turned and left, the door creaking shut behind him. The stables fell silent again. Ferry lay down on the hay, the smell of earth and pine filling the air. Above, the rafters cast long shadows like crooked branches, and somewhere outside, the wind stirred softly through the trees. He closed his eyes, but sleep did not come easily. The bard's voice still echoed in his mind. Long ago, before the long night first stirred, blending with Time's warning, his plea for trust. Between them, Ferry felt himself sinking into a silence heavier than dreams.